There's a quiet lie that most people believe, a lie so subtle, so deeply embedded in the way we think that it rarely gets questioned. It sounds like this: once I succeed, then I'll change. Once I feel confident, then I'll act. Once I become a winner, then I'll live like one. But that's not how life works. In fact, it's the exact opposite. You don't act like a winner after you become one. You become a winner because you chose to act like one long before there was any proof, before the results, before the recognition, before anyone believed in you. And this is where most people get stuck, trapped in a loop of hesitation, waiting for a version of themselves that will never arrive unless they build it first. The problem: look around at modern life. Everything is optimized for comfort, distraction, and instant validation. You wake up, and before your feet even touch the ground, your mind is already consumed. Notifications, messages, endless scrolling. You're pulled into a world where everyone else seems to be moving forward while you're stuck questioning your next step. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to outsource your identity. You let your environment tell you who you are. You let your current circumstances define your limits. You let your past mistakes whisper that you're not ready yet. So you wait to feel motivated. You wait to feel confident. You wait for the right moment. But the truth is, waiting is just fear dressed up as logic, because deep down you already know what needs to be done. You know the habits you've been avoiding. You know the discipline you've been delaying. You know the version of yourself you keep imagining but refusing to become. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. The gap between who you are and who you want to be is not a mystery. It's a set of repeated behaviors, daily decisions, small, often invisible actions that either reinforce weakness or build strength. But most people misunderstand this. They think winners are different. They think winners are born with something extra: more confidence, more clarity, more talent. What they don't see is that winners are simply people who stop negotiating with their excuses. They act differently, even when it feels unnatural, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it feels like they're pretending. Because in the beginning, it does feel like pretending. And that's the part most people can't handle. You start waking up early, but your mind says, this isn't you. You try to stay disciplined, but your habits pull you back. This won't last. You try to think bigger, but your environment shrinks you. Who do you think you are? So you retreat back to what's familiar, back to what's easy, back to what requires no growth. And every time you do that, you reinforce the same identity, not because you're incapable of more, but because you haven't yet decided to become more. There's a psychological pattern at play here. Your brain is designed to protect consistency, not success. It doesn't care about your dreams. It cares about what's familiar. So if you spent years identifying as someone who procrastinates, someone who hesitates, someone who doubts themselves, then the moment you try to act like a winner, your mind will resist, not because it's wrong, but because it's new, and new feels dangerous, even if it's exactly what you need. This is why so many people sabotage their own growth. They step into discomfort for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, but then the resistance builds. The internal voice gets louder, the old habits start calling, and instead of pushing through, they interpret the discomfort as a signing. Maybe this isn't for me. But that's not truth. That's withdrawal. Withdrawal from the person you used to be. Beginning of explanation. To understand what it means to act like a winner, you have to let go of the idea that identity is fixed. You are not a static person. You're a collection of repeated actions. What you do consistently becomes who you are. Not what you think, not what you say, not what you intend, but what you do. A winner is not defined by a result. A winner is defined by a standard. A way of operating, a way of thinking, a way of responding to life. And here's the key: that standard exists before the outcome. Think about it. Someone who is disciplined doesn't wait to feel disciplined. They act disciplined. Even when they're tired, even when they're unmotivated, even when no one is watching. And over time, that behavior becomes identity. Confidence works the same way. People believe confidence comes from success, but real confidence is built in the absence of it. It's built when you show up and try without guarantees, when you speak, even if your voice shakes, when you take action, even if you might fail. Confidence is not the cause of action. It is the result of repeated action. So when you say, I'll start when I feel ready, what you're really saying is, I'll start when I've already become the person who started. And that's the paradox. You're waiting for evidence of a future self that can only exist if you act now. Acting like a winner means stepping into behaviors that don't yet feel natural. It means holding yourself to a standard that your current identity hasn't fully caught up to. It means choosing discipline over comfort repeatedly, deliberately, and without applause. But let's be honest, this isn't easy, because acting like a winner requires something most people avoid at all costs: responsibility. Not surface level responsibility, but deep internal ownership. Ownership of your time, your habits, your mindset. No blaming your past, no blaming your environment, no blaming other people, or just a quiet, relentless decision. This is on me. And that level of ownership is heavy because it removes your excuses. It strips away the stories that kept you comfortable. It forces you to confront a simple truth. If your life doesn't change, it's because you didn't change. But here's where it becomes powerful, because the moment you accept that responsibility, you also gain control. Control over your actions, control over your direction, control over who you become. Most people want results without identity change. They want success without becoming the type of person who can sustain it. But that never works, because success is not something you reach and keep. It's something you maintain through who you are. If you don't build the habits of a winner, even if you get lucky once, you'll fall back. If you don't build the mindset of a winner, even if you achieve something, you won't believe you deserve it. And eventually you return to your baseline. So the real question is not, how do I win? The real question is, who do I need to become to make winning inevitable? And that starts long before any visible success. It starts in the quiet moments, the early mornings, the disciplined routines, the choices no one sees. It starts when it's inconvenient, when it's uncomfortable, when it feels pointless, because in those moments you're building something deeper than results. You are building identity, and identity is powerful, because once it's formed, it drives everything automatically. A person who sees themselves as disciplined doesn't debate whether to act, they just act. A person who sees themselves as focused doesn't struggle with distraction the same way, because their behavior aligns with their identity. So if you want to change your life, you don't start with outcomes, you start with behavior. You start by asking, what would a winner do today? Not next year, not someday, today. And then you do that even if it feels fake, even if it feels forced, even if it feels small, because repetition is what makes it real. At first, it will feel like you're playing a role, like you're stepping into someone else's life. But over time, something shifts, the resistance weakens, the habits stabilize, the identity starts to stick. And one day, without realizing it, you're no longer pretending, you've become it. But there's a deeper layer to this, because acting like a winner is not just about discipline and habits. It's about how you interpret struggle, how you respond to failure, how you carry yourself when things don't go your way. And this is where most people break, because they expect the journey to feel good. They expect progress to feel motivating. They expect growth to feel rewarding. But the truth is, it often feels the opposite. Growth feels like doubt. Progress feels slow. Discipline feels restrictive. And without the right mindset, you'll misinterpret all of it. You think something is wrong, when in reality, everything is working exactly as it should. In the next part, we're going to go deeper into this. We'll break down the internal battle, the voice that resists change, the emotional weight of discipline, and how to rewire your mind to not just act like a winner, but to think like one. Because action is only the beginning, and if you don't align your mindset with your behavior, you'll always feel like you're fighting yourself. So now we arrive at the real battlefield, not the external one, the world, the competition, the obstacles, but the internal one, the place where every decision is filtered, every action is negotiated, every attempt at growth is either strengthened or silently destroyed. Because acting like a winner is not just about what you do, it's about what you believe while you're doing it. There's a voice inside you. You've heard it your entire life. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's subtle, and it has one primary job: to keep you the same. This voice doesn't scream, "Don't succeed." That would be too obvious. Instead, it whispers things that sound reasonable. You can start tomorrow. You're too tired today. You've already done enough. What if you fail? And because it sounds logical, because it feels protective, you listen. But here's what most people never realize: it is not you. It's a collection of past conditioning, old experience, learned fears, moments where you hesitated and taught your brain that hesitation is safety. Every time you avoided discomfort, your mind took note. Every time you chose the easier path, your brain reinforced it. Not because it wants you to fail, but because it wants you to survive. And in its simplest form, survival means staying within what's known. So when you try to act like a winner, when you step outside your bonus patterns, your mind interprets that as risk, not opportunity. Risk. And this is where the real struggle begins. Because now it's not just about discipline, it's about awareness. You have to start noticing the patterns that have been running your life on autopilot. Notice how quickly you negotiate with yourself. You set a goal and almost instantly, your mind offers an easier version of it. You decide to wake up early and suddenly your bed feels heavier than ever. You commit to focus and distractions become more appealing than usual. This isn't random. This is resistance. Resistance shows up strongest when you're closest to growth. It's not a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's a sign that you're breaking an old one. But here's the danger. If you don't recognize resistance for what it is, you'll obey it. And when you obey it repeatedly, it becomes identity. You start to see yourself as someone who tries but doesn't follow through, someone who starts but doesn't finish, someone who wants more but can't stay consistent. And once that identity settles in, it becomes self-fulfilling. Because now, every time you face difficulty, you're not just dealing with the task, you're dealing with the story you've attached to yourself. So acting like a winner requires something deeper than effort. It requires separating yourself from your thoughts. Just because you think something doesn't make it true. Just because you feel resistance doesn't mean you should stop. Just because something is uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. This is one of the most important shifts you can make, because most people live as if their thoughts are commands. They feel something and immediately act on it. They think something and assume it must be valid, but winners don't operate like that. They observe their thoughts without obeying them. They feel discomfort without retreating from it. They experience doubt without letting it define their direction. And this creates a gap, a small but powerful space between impulse and action. In that space you choose, you either reinforce your old identity or you build a new one. Now let's go deeper, because there's another layer that holds people back, and it's more subtle. It's not just fear of failure, it's fear of inconsistency. People don't trust themselves. Not fully. They've broken too many promises to themselves, started too many things they didn't finish, committed and then quit when it got hard. So even when they feel motivated, there's a quiet doubt underneath. Will I actually stick to this? And that doubt is dangerous, because it weakens your actions before they even begin. You hesitate, you hold back, you avoid fully committing, because part of you expects to fail anyway. So how do you act like a winner when you don't even trust yourself? You rebuild that trust, but not through big dramatic changes. Through small, undeniable proof. You make a decision and you follow through, even if it's simple, even if it feels insignificant. Because every time you keep a promise to yourself, you send a message, I do what I say. And over time, that becomes identity, not because you declared it, but because you proved it. This is how winners are built, not through motivation, but through evidence. Now, here's another truth most people avoid. Acting like a winner often feels lonely, because the moment you start changing, you create distance. Distance between who you were and who you're becoming. Distance between your old habits and your new standards. And sometimes distance between you and other people. Not everyone will understand your discipline. Not everyone will relate to your focus. Some will question it, some will mock it, some will try to pull you back into who you used to be. And this is where your commitment gets tested, because it's easy to stay disciplined when it's convenient. But can you stay disciplined when it isolates you? When it separates you from comfort, from familiarity, from approval? Because acting like a winner means you stop needing validation for your effort, you stop explaining your choices, you stop waiting for others to agree with your direction. You move with quiet certainty, even when no one is clapping, even when no one is watching, even when no one understands. And that's not arrogance, that's alignment. Now let's talk about another internal struggle, one that's often misunderstood. Emotional inconsistency. Some days you feel strong, focused, clear, driven, and on those days everything feels possible. But then there are other days, heavy days, where your energy drops, your mind feels foggy, your motivation disappears. And this is where most people break their momentum, because they rely on feeling good to perform well. But winners don't depend on emotional stability, they build behavioral stability. They understand that emotions are temporary, they fluctuate. They rise and fall based on countless variables: sleep, stress, environment, even things you can't control. So instead of asking, do I feel like it, they ask, is this what I do? And that question changes everything. Because now your actions are no longer tied to your mood, they're tied to your identity. You don't work hard because you feel motivated, you work hard because that's who you are. And once that shift happens, consistency becomes easier, not effortless, but stable. Now, there's one more layer we need to address, and it's perhaps the most uncomfortable of all: letting go of your current identity. Because even if your current habits are holding you back, they are still familiar, they are still you. And stepping into a new identity means releasing that version of yourself, the one who hesitated, the one who doubted, the one who stayed comfortable. And that can feel like loss, even if it's necessary, because you're not just building something new, you're leaving something behind. And this is why people revert, not because they can't grow, but because they're not ready to let go. But here's the truth: you cannot hold on to your old identity and expect a new life. At some point, you have to choose, not once, but repeatedly. You choose discipline over distraction, focus over comfort, growth over familiarity. And every time you choose correctly, you weaken the old identity and strengthen the new one. But this is still only part of the process, because acting like a winner externally and stabilizing your internal world leads to something even deeper: a shift in how you see the world itself, how you interpret opportunities, how you handle pressure, how you define success and failure. Because at the highest level, winners don't just act differently, they perceive differently. And in the next part, we're going to step into that layer. We'll explore how your perception shapes your reality, how to reframe struggle into advantage, and how to build a mindset where winning is no longer a distant goal, but an inevitable outcome of how you think. By now, something should feel different, not necessarily easier, but clearer. Because once you begin to see the internal patterns, the resistance, the doubt, the emotional swings, you can no longer pretend they're invisible, and that awareness changes the game. But awareness alone is not enough, because you can see the problem and still remain stuck inside it. This is where perception comes in, not what's happening around you, but how you interpret what's happening. Two people can face the exact same situation and walk away with completely different outcomes. One sees pressure and shuts down. The other sees pressure and sharpens. One sees failure and retreats. The other sees failure and recalibrates. The difference is not circumstance, it's meaning. And this is where most people unknowingly sabotage themselves. They assign the wrong meaning to the right experiences. They struggle, think this isn't working. They feel resistance and think, this isn't for me. They face setbacks and think, I'm not good enough. But what if all of that is backwards? What if struggle is not a sign of failure, but a sign of alignment? What if resistance is not something to avoid, but something to move through? What if setbacks are not proof that you're incapable, but proof that you're in the process? Because the truth is, growth rarely feels like growth while you're inside it. It feels like confusion, like friction, like effort that isn't immediately rewarded. And without the right perception, you'll misread all of it. You'll step away at the exact moment you should lean in. This way, acting like a winner is not just behavioral or emotional. It's interpretive. You have to learn to see differently, to look at the same challenges, but assign them a different meaning. When something is difficult, instead of asking, why is this so hard, you ask, what is this building in me? When progress feels slow, instead of thinking, this isn't working, you consider, what if this is exactly how it's supposed to feel? Because once you change the meaning, you change your response is what determines your direction. Now let's go deeper into this idea, because perception doesn't just affect how you handle struggle, it affects what you notice. Your mind is constantly filtering reality. Out of everything happening around you, it selects what seems important based on what you believe. If you believe opportunities are rarer, you'll notice limitations. If you believe you're behind, you'll notice comparison. If you believe you're not capable, you'll notice every piece of evidence that supports that. But if you start to shift your identity, if you begin to act like someone who's growing, adapting, evolving, your focus changes. Now you start noticing possibilities, lessons, patterns, the same world, but a completely different experience of it. This is why mindset is not just a motivational concept, it's a filter. And that filter shapes everything. Now here's something even more subtle. Winners don't just interpret challenges differently. They interpret time differently. Most people are impatient, not because they lack discipline, but because they misunderstand the process. They expect visible results too quickly. They measure progress in outcomes instead of in transformation. So when things don't change fast enough, they assume something is wrong. But winners operate on a different timeline. They understand that real change is slow and then sudden. For a long time, it looks like nothing is happening. The habits feel repetitive, the effort feels unnoticed, the results feel distant, and then almost unexpectedly, things shift. Opportunities appear, performance improves, momentum builds, but that sudden success is not sudden at all. It's accumulated. It's the result of days, weeks, months of invisible work. And if you don't understand that, you'll quit during the invisible phase. This is why acting like a winner requires patience, not passive waiting, but active, consistent effort without immediate reward. You show up even when nothing seems to be changing. You improve even when no one notices. You stay disciplined even when results are delayed because you trust the process, not emotionally, but logically. Now let's confront another uncomfortable truth. There will be moments where, despite all your effort, you still feel lost. Moments where your direction isn't clear, where your progress feels uncertain, where your confidence dips, despite everything you've been doing. And in those moments, your perception will be tested again, because it's easy to feel aligned when everything makes sense. But can you stay aligned when it doesn't? Can you continue acting like a winner when the path ahead is unclear? Because real growth often requires movement before clarity. You don't always get a perfect plan. Sometimes you only get the next step. And if you refuse to move until everything is certain, you stay stuck. Winners understand this. They move with incomplete information. They take action without guarantees. They trust that clarity will come through movement, not before it. And this creates momentum. Momentum is powerful, not because it makes things easy, but because it reduces friction. Once you're in motion, it's easier to stay in motion. Once you're consistent, it's easier to remain consistent. But getting there requires an initial push, a decision to act without waiting for perfect conditions. Now, there's one final layer we need to explore in this part, and it's deeply personal, your relationship with yourself. Because at the end of the day, acting like a winner is not about impressing others. It's about how you show up for yourself. Do you respect your own standards? Do you follow through on your own commitments? Do you hold yourself accountable even when no one else does? Because if you don't, nothing external will fix that. You can have opportunities, resources, even moments of success. But if your internal relationship is weak, it won't last. Winners build a quiet form of self-respect. Not loud, not performative, but consistent. They trust themselves, not because they're perfect, because they're reliable. And that reliability is built in small moments, the moments where you could stop, but you continue, the moments where you could avoid, but you engage, the moments where you could settle, but you push over time. Those moments stack and they form something powerful, a foundation that doesn't shake easily because it's not based on emotion, it's based on evidence. And once you have that, everything else becomes more stable. But there's still one piece missing, because even with the right actions, the right mindset, the right perception, there are external forces that will challenge you. Your environment, the people around you, the systems you're part of, the expectations placed on you. And if you don't learn how to navigate those, they will slowly pull you back into who you used to be. So in the next part, we're going to step outside of the internal world and examine the external one. We'll break down how your environment shapes your behavior, how to protect your focus in a distracted world, and how to stay aligned even when everything around you is designed to break that alignment. Because becoming a winner is not just an internal transformation, it's a complete shift in how you live, move, and interact with the world around you. Up until now, everything we've explored has been internal. Your thoughts, your habits, your perception, your identity, and that's where it begins. But it doesn't end there, because no matter how strong your mindset becomes, no matter how disciplined you're trying to be, you are still influenced by your environment, the spaces you spend time in, the people you interact with, the content you consume, the systems you operate within. And if you ignore that, you'll constantly feel like you're fighting an uphill battle. Imagine trying to stay focused in a room full of distractions, trying to build discipline in an environment built on comfort, trying to think long-term in a culture obsessed with immediacy. It's possible, but it's unnecessarily difficult because your environment is not neutral. It is either reinforcing your growth or quietly pulling you backwards. And most people underestimate how powerful that pull is. You might wake up with clarity. You might feel motivated, aligned, ready to act. But then you step into your day and slowly that clarity gets diluted. You open your phone just for a moment. You check something small, nothing serious, but one click turns into 10 turns into 30 minutes. And before you know it, your focus is fragmented, not destroyed, but weakened. And that's how it happens, not in dramatic collapses, but in subtle erosion. Your standards don't disappear overnight, they fade. And the more they fade, the harder it becomes to act like the person you're trying to become. So if you're serious about acting like a winner, you have to become intentional about your environment. Not perfect, not extreme, but intentional. Start with something simple. What are you exposing your mind to daily? Because your brain is constantly absorbing patterns, even when you're not paying attention. The conversations you hear, the content you scroll through, the ideas you repeatedly encounter, they shape your beliefs quietly. If you're constantly surrounded by negativity, you'll start to think in limitations. If you're constantly consuming distraction, you'll struggle with focus. If you're surrounded by people who settle, you'll normalize settling, not because you're weak, but because you're human. Adaptation is automatic. So if you want to act like a winner, you need to create conditions that make winning behaviors more likely. This doesn't mean isolating yourself completely. It means being selective with your time, selective with your attention, selective with your energy, because all three are limited. And once they're spent, you don't get them back. Now let's talk about people. This is one of the hardest parts, because growth often changes your relationships, not always dramatically, but subtly. You start thinking differently. You start prioritizing differently. You start behaving differently. And not everyone will grow with you. Some people will stay exactly where they are, same habits, same mindset, same conversations. And if you're not careful, you'll get pulled back into that pattern. Not because they're trying to hold you back, but because familiarity is comfortable. They relate to the old version of you, the version that didn't challenge the norm, the version that didn't push beyond what was expected. So when you start changing, it creates friction. Sometimes it's subtle, a joke, a comment, a moment of doubt. Other time, questioning your choices, dismissing your effort, projecting their own limitations onto you. And this is where your identity gets tested externally, because now it's not just about what you believe, it's about what you hold on to when other people don't reflect it back to you. Can you maintain your standards without external validation? Can you stay disciplined even when others choose comfort? Can you continue evolving even if it means outgrowing certain environments, because acting like a winner sometimes means making quiet adjustments, spending less time in certain conversations, creating distance from unproductive patterns, choosing solitude over misalignment, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. Now, this doesn't mean you abandon people. It means you protect your direction, because if you don't, your environment will shape you by default, and default rarely leads to growth. Now, let's zoom out even further. We're living in a time where distraction is constant. Not occasional, not avoidable, constant. Everything is designed to capture your attention, to keep you engaged, to pull you into endless loops of consumption. And attention is your most valuable resource, because wherever your attention goes, your life follows. If your attention is scattered, your results will be scattered. If your attention is focused, your progress will reflect that. So acting like a winner in today's world requires something deeper than discipline. It requires attention control, the ability to direct your focus intentionally instead of reacting to whatever appears in front of you. And this is harder than it sounds, because distraction doesn't feel like distraction. It feels like relief, a break, a pause, a moment to escape effort. But those small escapes add up. They break your momentum, they dilute your focus, they reduce your capacity to go deep. And depth is where growth happens. Shallow effort leads to shallow results. Focused effort leads to transformation. So you have to ask yourself, where is my attention going every day? Not occasionally, consistently, because consistency in attention creates consistency in outcome. Now, there's another external factor that often goes unnoticed: structure. How your day is organized, how your time is allocated, how your priorities are arranged. Because without structure, you rely on willpower, and willpower is unreliable. Some days it's strong, some days it's not. So if your success depends on how you feel, it will always be inconsistent. But structure removes the dependency. You don't decide what to do in the moment, you've already decided. And that reduces friction. It simplifies action. It makes discipline more automatic. Winners don't rely on constant motivation. They rely on systems, simple, repeatable systems that guide behavior. Wake up at a certain time, work during specific hours, train consistently, limit distractions intentionally, not perfectly, but consistently. And over time, that structure compounds. It creates rhythm, and rhythm creates stability. Now, here's where everything starts to come together: your internal world, your thoughts, your identity, your perception, and your external world, your environment, your attention, your structure. They are not separate. They influence each other constantly. Your environment shapes your behavior reinforces your identity. Your identity affects your perception influences your choices, and that loop continues. So if you change one part of the system, you start to shift the entire cycle. You act differently, you think differently. You think differently, you choose differently. You choose differently, you become different, and that's the process. Not instant, not dramatic, but consistent. However, there's still something we haven't fully addressed. Because even with the right environment, the right structure, the right mindset, there will be moments where everything feels heavy, moments where the effort accumulates, where the discipline feels exhausting, where the progress doesn't match the energy you're putting in. And in those moments, you'll face a deeper question. Now, what should I do? But why am I doing this at all? Because without a strong reason, discipline eventually fades. So in the next part, we're going to go deeper into purpose, not surface level goals, not temporary motivation, but something more grounded. We'll explore how to connect your actions to something meaningful, how to build a reason that sustains effort, and how to keep moving forward, even when everything inside you wants to stop. Because acting like a winner is not just about how you act or think. It's about what drives you when nothing else does. At this point, everything has been laid out in front of you, not as a theory, not as motivation, but as a pattern, a way of living. You've seen the internal battle, the voice that resists, the doubt that whispers, the habits that pull you backward. You've seen the external forces, the environment, the distractions, the people, the system shaping your behavior. You've seen how perception changes everything, how the same struggle can either break you or build you. And now, all of it comes down to one simple, uncomfortable truth. Nothing changes until you do. Not your circumstances, not your results, not your identity. Because the life you want is not something you arrive at, it's something you become aligned with. And alignment is not built through intention, it's built through action, repeated, consistent, often invisible action. There is no moment where everything clicks and suddenly becomes easy. There is no day where you wake up and feel completely ready. There is no version of you waiting in the future who will do the work for you. There is only this moment and the decision you make inside it to act or to delay, to step forward or to stay where you are, to reinforce the old identity or to begin building a new one. Because every action you take is a vote for the person you're becoming. And most people underestimate how powerful those votes are. They look for big changes, big breakthroughs, big moments. But transformation doesn't happen that way. It happens quietly. In the moment you choose discipline over distraction, in the moment you continue when it's uncomfortable, in the moment you follow through when no one is watching, those moments seem small, insignificant even, but they are not. They are the foundation of everything, because identity is not built in intensity. It's built in consistency. And once that identity solidifies, everything else begins to shift naturally. You don't have to force discipline. You don't have to chase motivation. You don't have to convince yourself to act, because it's no longer something you're trying to do. It's who you are. That's when the real change happens. But let's be clear about something. This path is not easy. There will be days where you question everything, days where your energy is low, your focus is scattered, your confidence feels distant, days where the progress feels invisible and the effort feels heavier than usual. And in those moments, you will be tempted to stop, to slow down, to return to what's comfortable. And that's where the difference is made, not in the days where you feel strong, but in the days where you don't. Because anyone can move forward when it feels good, but acting like a winner means continuing even when it doesn't. It means understanding that your feelings are temporary, but your actions have consequences. It means trusting the process even when you don't yet see the results. And most importantly, it means taking responsibility, not partial responsibility, not when it's convenient, but full ownership of your time, your choices, your direction, your life. Because the moment you fully accept that everything changes, you stop blaming, you stop hoping that something external will fix what's internal, and instead you start building slowly, deliberately, without needing permission. You begin to realize that becoming a winner is not about reaching a destination. It's about operating at a standard you choose, a standard you maintain, a standard you return to again and again, no matter how many times you fall short, because you will fall short. That's part of it. There will be days where you don't meet your own expectations, moments where you slip back into old habits, times where you lose focus, lose discipline, lose clarity. But that doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do next. Do you stay there, or do you reset? Do you reinforce the old pattern, or do you interrupt it? Because acting like a winner is not about perfection. It's about response. How quickly you get back on track, how honestly you assess your actions, how consistently you return to your standard. That's what builds us resilience. And over time, that resilience becomes something deeper. It becomes self-trust, confidence, not loud, not performative, but stable. You trust yourself to show up, to follow through, to handle difficulty, to keep moving regardless of how you feel. And once you have that, you become dangerous in the best possible way. Because now your progress is no longer dependent on circumstances. It's driven by identity, and identity is powerful. It shapes your decisions automatically. It aligns your behavior without constant effort. It turns discipline into default. That's when winning stops being something you chase and starts becoming something you do. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently. And here's the final truth. You will never feel like a winner before you act like one. The confidence you're waiting for comes from action. The clarity you're seeking comes from movement. The identity you want comes from repetition, not the other way around. So if you're waiting to feel ready, to feel confident, to feel certain, you will stay exactly where you are. But if you decide right now to act differently, to think differently, to hold yourself to a higher standard, even in small ways, everything begins to shift, not instantly, but inevitably, because every day you act like a winner, you move further away from who you used to be and closer to who you're becoming, until one day there's no gap left, no pretending, no forcing, no hesitation, just alignment. And when that happens, you won't need to ask if you've become a winner, because it will be obvious, not just in what you've achieved, but in how you think, how you act, and who you are. So don't wait. Don't delay. Don't negotiate with the version of you that wants to stay comfortable. Step into it now. Act like the person you know you're capable of becoming, not tomorrow, not someday, because the moment you do, that's when everything begins.